Thanks so much for joining us for the 2020 BCI Virtual Annual Meeting. I'm Tim Labinas, BCI Executive Director, and in this session, we're going to be focusing on church development and pastoral support in the Baptist Convention of Iowa. We'll be taking a look at how BCI churches are doing, as well as new opportunities to support and strengthen our churches. Every church has experienced massive change this year, and we're trusting that God will use the multiple crises we are experiencing to sanctify and strengthen His bride, the church. First, we're going to hear from our national entities that exist to serve pastors and churches. Lifeway Christian Resources has undergone significant change in a very short period of time. I sat down with Lifeway President Ben Mandrell, a former pastor and church planter, to hear about the history of Lifeway and the major changes taking place now to better serve pastors and churches in the future. I'm looking forward to our next guest. We have Ben Mandrell, who's with Lifeway Christian Resources. Ben, thank you so much for being part of the Baptist Convention of Iowa annual meeting this year. And we know you've been to Lifeway for a little over a year now. And I'm guessing it's going pretty smooth, going as expected. You can talk about that a little bit more in just a few minutes. But first, go ahead and introduce yourself. How did you end up at Lifeway?
Hey, yeah, good to be with you guys. Ben Mandrell. I'm from the Midwest, so I'm relating to your audience well, I hope. I grew up in Northwest Illinois near the Quad City area there of Iowa, so very familiar with good Midwestern folks and churches there. Man, I was a church planter in Denver, Colorado, loving my life out there. We started a church in an elementary school, which went to a high school, which eventually went to a restored Walmart building. We were there 5 years and things were going great when God began to knock on my door about this Lifeway thing. I had never dreamed I would be the president of Lifeway. It wasn't on my radar at all. And yet, once the search committee called me, I had one of those unshakable calling stories of 45 days in a row of sleepless nights, asking the Lord, why is this so heavy on my chest? Why can I not release this? I love my church. I love my city. I love where I'm at. And yet my wife felt that God was calling us to go through the process. And then finally, at the end, we just said, okay, we just have to trust that if we go through the process and they feel like I'm the person, we got to the place where we just said, Lord, if you open the door, we'll walk through it. And He opened the door. And so God called us to come to Lifeway, move our family back to Tennessee. I had pastored a church in Tennessee prior to going to Denver. So this is somewhat familiar territory, but we're in Middle Tennessee now, not West Tennessee, and leading Lifeway into a new season, a new era of ministry.
Yeah, wonderful. Now, so how long have you been there? You've been there a year. When was your start date?
14 months. So just a little over a year. It's been a wild and crazy year for everybody, I know.
Yeah.
But especially us over here at Lifeway.
Yeah, I want to hear about that. You know, in November of 2019, and you were just getting started, who would have seen 3 months later all that's happened? So yeah, give us a little history of what were some of the big events, and actually talk through some of the big decision points that you've had in 2020.
Well, when I arrived at Lifeway, last fall, the organization was in a state of grief of losing the stores, like rightly so. Those 174 touch points in communities, and customers were sad to see the stores go, but the customers had voted loudly. Mm-hmm. They weren't buying in the stores anymore. They were wanting to do more shopping online. Customer patterns were changing. So when I arrived there, you had an organization that was ready to move on to the online channel and begin to reach more people through online. But it was a sad thing to see so many great people lose their jobs and lose the stores. And so there was a period where it was right to grieve and to appropriately recognize that chapter of ministry. So when I got to Lifeway, it was a lot of listening, a lot of loving, a lot of encouraging, a lot of people work, a lot of pastoring. And at the same time, through our church consulting arm, Auxano, we started to go through a kind of a re-envisioning of the future of Lifeway process. And so we started working on 4 things: mission, values, strategy, and measures. And so behind the scenes, we started reworking our mission statement, reworking our values, and then to get to strategy and how we're going to measure strategy. That was all going extremely well. We were getting a lot of momentum. Sales were up 12%. We were paying off the leases from the stores. It looked like we were moving pretty seamlessly from that chapter into the next. And then March happened and COVID hit and the whole thing got turned upside down. Every plan we had made suddenly changed. And I'm sure everybody listening can relate to this. You know, we all had a lot of plans for the year before March. And so once that happened, obviously just watching the headlines, you all saw that we then began to go into a series of trade-off decisions that were necessary for us to really adapt to the environment that we found ourselves in. So in March, April, May, we ended up having to do a reduction in force, which was very heartbreaking year one for me to have to let good people go. We had to make some tough decisions around Ridgecrest, around our word search program and some other things. And so, you know, one thing that we did learn, and this is a leadership principle that I've gained this year, is that someone said, scarcity creates clarity. And it really is true. When you have less resources and you're having to make strategic, disciplined decisions, you get real clear real quick about what's most important, and everything else begins to get pushed off to the edges. Lifeway's in a season where we're getting very clear on who we are, why God created us, and where we're going in the future. So that's a good thing, even though it's been painful.
Yeah, very good. I want to hear more about that. And maybe one way to contrast that is take your January 1st, 2020 vision frame and mission statement and talk about maybe January 2022 or something. Describe one and describe the other, and that will help us to maybe see some of the trends.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we did this year was went back to our creation story. Lifeway was created, obviously, as the Sunday School Board to be an organization that filled up local churches with high quality, doctrinally sound content, recognizing that church leaders are crazy busy, immersed in relationships, trying to develop leaders and people. All church leaders need a place where they can find curated content that they can trust. They don't have time to read every word. They don't have that time to digest every study. They just need to know it's going to be solid. And so the main reason that people have shopped at Lifeway over the years or have used Lifeway resources is because of the word trustworthy. We create stuff that's in line with Scripture, and people know that and they trust that. So going back to the mission of why we were created, that really has to continue to be the mission. That more than ever right now, Lifeway needs to get back in touch with church leaders who are in the front lines of ministry, who need content, tools, and resources. And we go build it in our shop so that they don't have to. And so what that's going to mean for us is that we've got to get smaller faster. We've got to get more in tune with local church leaders. We've got to get more relational, less corporate. We've got to get more warm, create warmth and rapport with the people who are making content decisions in the church. And the way we say it is we got to stop building spec houses and hoping people buy it. We need to start creating custom homes for people, the stuff that churches really need, that it's most helpful in their context.
All right, very good. Well, I have one final question, Ben. Imagine you're in front of a group of Baptist Convention of Iowa pastors and leaders, and we're curious how we can connect with Lifeway, or what are some ways that Lifeway can help our ministries?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for your patience. We're in a season of really reinventing this thing to make it a new paradigm that better fits the needs of local church leaders. And so we still have a lot of work to do. I hope you won't give up on us, because we are in the midst of, there's a lot happening behind the scenes that most people don't see, but we're a year or two away from this whole thing looking, feeling, and functioning very differently. So I hope you won't give up on us. Thanks for your patience. Number two, Tim, I told you this before, I really want to get there. One of my passions is building relationships with people, and I'm a leader that likes to lead from knowledge of where people are. And one of the reasons I'm excited about de-emphasizing a headquarter building, which is what I'm leading us through right now, is if we can shed the need for a large footprint in downtown Nashville and begin to allow people to be out more, travel more, be in regions more, I think we'll be in better touch with church leaders from the Midwest and the West and the Northeast. I've been very concerned that when we all live in Nashville, Tennessee, and we attend churches in Nashville, Tennessee, but we're making products that are supposed to serve the broader church, I just wonder if that's possible. And so a big heartbeat of mine is, and I had lots of travel plans for the fall, all canceled. I just get out there and meet some of your pastors and meet some of your church leaders and begin to listen and hear and experience the culture there so that we can be sure we're building stuff here that makes a difference for your churches in Iowa. And you're not getting something that's made for Nashville and you're trying to tweak it and make it fit in your context, but it's square peg, round hole. I really hope we can change that.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Ben. I really appreciate that, and we will be patient. We're so grateful for the many decades of great products and service and connection that we've had with Lifeway. And we thank you that God has put you in this position for this time, and it's very different than any of us expected. And but grateful that you're there, that you're leading, that you're focusing, and we're praying for you as you make hard decisions. So strategy is saying yes to things, but it's saying no to things that sometimes are difficult and involve lives and even people who've been connected for years and years through faithful service. And those are tough decisions, and we'll be praying for you as you make those. So thank you for your time today, Ben, and for being part of our annual meeting.
Can I just say a quick word of encouragement to your pastors?
Yes, please.
Having been a pastor for 17 years, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's continuing to serve faithfully in their churches. We pastors, we're energized by the gatherings. We're energized by the opportunity to deliver the word and preach the word in season. It feels out of season right now. And it's hard work, and preaching to a camera with a sparsely populated room. It's not as energizing. It's harder work than it used to be, but it's no less important. And so I just want to thank your pastors for being faithful, your church leaders for being faithful. God's going to see us through this. On the other side of this, there's going to be a lot of great ministry lessons that we can take forward. And so thanks for allowing us to partner with you. Appreciate all of you, what you do.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for your time today. Together, we support 6 SBC seminaries through the cooperative program. President Jason Allen from Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Kansas City spoke with me about how COVID has impacted education this year. We also discussed how MBTS has addressed contemporary ideologies from a theologically sound foundation. Our next guest is Dr. Jason Allen, who's the president of Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Kansas City, Missouri. Dr. Allen, welcome to the Baptist Convention of Iowa annual meeting.
Tim, it's a delight to be with you and our many good friends there in Iowa. Unfortunately, it's virtual this year. I have enjoyed being with you guys in person a time or two over the years, but delighted to have this conversation with you today. Yeah, very good. I remember just a couple of years ago, you spoke at our pastor's banquet, and then you were our main speaker, and I appreciate that. I see you're maybe at Spurgeon Library, but maybe not. What have you been up to today? No, I am speaking to you right now from a hotel in St. Charles, Missouri. And I'm here for the Missouri Baptist Convention, which they elected to meet in person this year with all the social distancing and COVID-19 protocols we won't expect. So I have some responsibilities here. I spoke earlier. I'll be speaking again at an event later this evening. And so I'm in my hotel room and here visiting with you, and have the Spurgeon Library as a backdrop, an appropriate backdrop, but a backdrop nonetheless. Very good. Well, I'm representing the churches and pastors of the Baptist Convention of Iowa, and we're curious how things are going at Midwestern. And so let's look back at 2020, and quite a year. And we'd like to hear how Midwestern has navigated all the challenges of 2020. Yeah, thank you. I'll tell you, the year 2020 has been a challenge, and we still have a little over 2 months left to go. And it's just strange how different issues and even personal life events have coalesced to make it a challenging year. I've lost a couple of dear friends in ministry this year who died. As I record this with you today, again, this is a mundane point, but a real point of heart sadness. My family lost our favorite dog today. Oh, no. And so you can imagine my children are just heartbroken, and I would be lying if I said I weren't heartbroken either. So it seems like 2020 keeps showing up in our lives in ways that we were ready for the year to be behind us. Most notably, most especially, of course, is the COVID-19 challenge. And that showed up in our lives in a major way at Midwestern Seminary in March, and led to us abruptly transitioning to finishing the spring semester online, and then to quickly making plans for the fall that may well have to be online. So if you are on my campus right now, you would see We are having in-person classes. Those classes are socially distanced and with students wearing masks. We are having chapel, but it is very much social distance, and we can only have so many people in our chapel because of COVID. And so we are having residential activity, but it's a far cry from fall 19 residential activity. At the same time, I'm profoundly thankful for the ability to have as much normalcy as we can have, and profoundly thankful for our faculty and staff who've worked so adroitly and our students who have adapted so graciously to these challenges. So what I've been telling our people coming into fall of 20 and during fall of 20, that if we compare fall of 20, seminary, educationally speaking, in comparison to fall of 19, well, we're going to live a pretty disappointed life. But if we compare fall of 20 in contrast with April of 20 or June of 20, well, then we can be encouraged. And so we are having in-person classes. We are having a lot of activities that maybe 4 or 5 months ago seemed unlikely, but we are able to have those without having a catastrophic COVID outbreak. We have had some faculty and staff and students get infected by it. Thankfully, we've had no one seriously ill. We've had the spouse of one employee was hospitalized for a couple of days, but thankfully his condition was never life-threatening or capital S serious. So for us, though, then you get into, well, how's the semester actually going? From an enrollment standpoint, we're encouraged. Our enrollment is up once again. And again, that is not only against broader trends in higher education of, generally speaking, declining enrollments in institutions of higher learning, but a pronounced decline in light of COVID. And so we're thankful our headcount is up again, our hours taken are up again, our incoming class is up again. And then look, Southern Baptists have proven themselves to be resilient and sacrificial, even in light of COVID, to the corporate program, where our corporate program is a little soft nationally, but nothing compared to what many of us feared and what many national giving trends projected. And then you have some places like you guys who are generous and are taking steps to even increase your generosity as to what you send on to the national level. And for that, we are very thankful.
Very good. And so this fall, how do you anticipate things in the spring changing? Do you think it'll look like the fall or more progress, or too early to tell?
Yeah, so we think spring of 21 will be a lot like fall of 20. So what the metaphor we've used is in the spring of 20, in March of 20, we had to like abruptly flip a switch to go to COVID, to go online in light of COVID. This fall, we have a dial. And so we have classes that are meeting, again, residential classes with social distancing, but we also have a dial so that any class, all of our classes can go exclusively online instantaneously as needed. And by online, I mean actually interactive, like we're doing now, interactive video. And so that way, if a professor comes down with COVID or several of the students come down with COVID and we need to switch it online, we can do that. So that's the nature of this fall. And that's how we anticipate the spring being as well, to where we'll continue that dial capability we have to turn it as necessary as relates to COVID. And we're prayerful and hopeful that fall of 21 can be like fall of 19.
Well, let's talk about, besides the issues for the school from 2020, let's talk about some of the other issues, the turbulence from the racial tension or the turbulence that have come up politically and with the election. Have you and the other faculty talked about tweaking some of the courses to address some of these issues differently after 2020?
Yeah, so we haven't undertaken a formal curricular revision, but I will say this, these issues find their way to Kansas City like everywhere else. And not that we avoid those or want to be insulated from them, but look, this is a difficult time to be in ministry. And you have a whole host of issues. The presidential election hangs over all this, the racial unrest, or let me say this, the racial tension, and the social unrest. You have the broader economic uncertainty that hangs over this. You have the fact we live in a culture of hypercriticism, a cultural moment when there's such a low cost to attack, meaning anyone with a Twitter handle can just attack. So what do? We have to be clear about who we are, clear about our convictions, clear about our mission, do our very best to make ourselves, to not make ourselves easily misrepresentable. And so do our very best to speak clearly and confidently about who we are, about the vision that we have, about our determination to serve Southern Baptists, to serve the church, for the church, as we talk about often here, and continue to do that. Look, the racial issue is particularly challenging because I mean, this is, as has been written and said by others, this is America's original sin. And the fact that you now have a nation that is approaching, not quite, but approaching 250 years old, that still is wrestling with the race issue. And so on the one hand, you have people like myself and like you, Tim, and others who are making good faith efforts to racial reconciliation, want to be agents for healing and for helpfulness, and to be grace extenders to our aggrieved brothers and sisters, and want to do our very best in that. Then you have at the same time come in the conversation unhelpful, in fact, outright unhelpful movements and ideas, things like critical race theory, intersectionality, wokeism, liberation theology. I mean, all that's coming at it. And so you're trying to say, yes, we want to promote racial reconciliation. We celebrate diversity in the body of Christ, and heaven will be diverse, and it's healthy and good and sweet when the church on this earth reflects that heavenly diversity. But we can do that, and we must do that in a way that's not theologically compromising, that isn't importing secular theories that, frankly, the more you look at those, the more troubling they are, especially critical theory, that is not importing those ideologies into the church. And so it's tough. And look, I was telling a colleague the other day, we're visiting about these things. I said, look, here's the challenge. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to be pitch perfect on this issue. And it takes a lot of humility for people like me that I'm a white male in my early 40s from the Deep South. And on the one hand, I have seen racism up close and personal, not as a victim of it, but as an observer of it. And so, look, it's there. It's true. It's tragically common its occurrence. At the same time, I know what it's like as a white male from the Deep South to see people who are accused of being racist when they're not, and that has its own burden and its own grief and its own frustration. And so trying to balance all of that, but to speak a message of love and of encouragement and of hopefulness to especially our brothers and sisters who are African American, have carried a particular burden in this. It's something we want to do. It's something we must do. It's something we strive to do.
I have one more question. Let's talk about partnership between Midwestern and Baptist Convention of Iowa. I'd like you to briefly address two groups in Iowa. The first group are pastors who've been at it for a while, and maybe they have a Bible degree or part of a seminary degree, and wondering what the best next steps are for them, not just pastors, but other elders and deacons and leaders within the churches. What does Midwestern have for them? And then talk to the college seniors as well, who are beginning to sense God's leadership for them to be involved in ministry. What's the best next step for them?
Well, the first group, first of all, we have basically every degree completion possibility under the sun. And look, God's call to ministry comes to different people at different times in different places. And so if you're experiencing God's call to ministry when you're 64 and you don't have a college degree and God's calling you ministry, well, we want to help you with that. And that probably doesn't look like, if you're at age 64, it probably doesn't look like you getting a college degree and then an MDiv degree and, oh, by the way, a DMin degree. It probably doesn't, but it probably does look like you wanting to strengthen your toolkit and us to equip you where you are. That's where things like our For the Church Institute is helpful. That's where things like our certificate programs are helpful. That's where things like perhaps our Accelerate program is helpful, where you can get an undergraduate and MDiv degree together in 5 years. And it's an incredible program. So, though I'm a huge advocate for Midwestern Seminary, as you know, Tim, I'm slow to kind of layer on to pastors a lot of heavy formal expectation, like you have to get this degree or you have to complete this degree or you're going to be inferior in your task. I never want to communicate that sentiment. At the same time, I want to say, never has theological education, ministry preparation been more accessible to you. Technologically accessible, financially accessible through the cooperative program. And never has it been more needed, I think. Even some of these issues we've talked about the past 30 minutes, the complicating times we live in, the cultural confusion we live in, the ethical transformation we've lived in, everything from issues from sexuality and gender to the pro-life issue to how we lead and serve in a culture and community that needs racial reconciliation. There's so much difficulty, there's so much confusion, so much complexity that it's just tough. And it's even tougher if you aren't equipped or being equipped. I would say to the college students, look, I would encourage you to be trained in the Midwest as you're in Iowa. Midwestern Seminary is here situated in the Midwest in Kansas City, and we would love to partner with you. And the reality is most people do minister, generally speaking, in the geographical context with which they're from. That's not ironclad. I mean, some people are from the Midwest, they minister in the South. Some people from the South minister, in the Pacific Northwest, et cetera, et cetera. But generally speaking, God tends to use us, generally speaking, in the broad geography of where we're from. And so if you're from Iowa, we're the natural seminary for you to study at. We'd love to have you study with us and be equipped in the Midwest to serve in the Midwest, but be equipped in such a way for Midwestern Seminary that you have the full ministry toolkit, regardless of where God calls you in the future, domestically around the country or beyond the country through international church planting, mission work, what have you. So we're encouraged. You guys know us for the church as Midwestern Seminary, for the kingdom, Spurgeon College, that broader undergraduate vision, be equipped, whether you're going to be in ministry or in some ways like a marketplace ministry, marketplace mission. So we offer business and cultural studies and communications and various other degrees at the undergraduate level, so that students can graduate from Spurgeon College and be equipped with ministry and some sort of secular degree field as well. So look, we're thankful for the stewardship God's given us. We're thankful to be in partnership with our friends there in Iowa, and we want to be faithful and want to be faithful with you guys.
Very good. It's been great being partners. You may recall when you came to Midwestern, I was a student there and just graduated a few months after you arrived. So I've been able to watch the journey of the development of Midwestern in these last 8 or so years. And I'm so grateful for what God has done while you've been there, and the quality of faculty and staff, and also the facilities. And not only that, the tone and morale and atmosphere is just remarkably different than it was then. And so grateful for what you're doing, and God is blessing in many ways, and one of them is the increased enrollment. And it's a joy to see the increased influence that Midwestern has had on the Midwest and beyond. And I thank you for your role in all of that. And also thank you for your time today and for meeting with us at the Baptist Convention of Iowa in our annual meeting.
Thank you, brother. God bless. God's blessing to you and to the churches and ministers there in Iowa.
All right, thank you. All right, have a good afternoon, Dr. Allen. With all the changes we faced in 2020, this year is a great time for church leaders to re-examine their ministry philosophies and strategies. Church Unique is a church vision process available to BCI churches that is designed to give churches the clarity and unity they need to move forward.
I'm really excited to be able to have a conversation today with Jim Randall. Jim is the co-founder and the CEO of Oxano Consulting, and he is the senior lead navigator for Church Unique. Jim, thanks so much for joining us today for a conversation about Church Unique.
And thank you so much for having us. Looking forward to it.
So first, I want to talk a little bit about your title. It's kind of a unique title, this lead navigator for Church Unique. Why not just consultant? Why did you choose the name navigator? What does that really mean?
Yeah, that was a big decision for us early on. And really there was a couple of things involved there. First and foremost, there had been a kind of a cultural stigma within the local church with the word consultant. The stigma was that a consultant was going to come from the outside and tell you what to do, how to do it. They had a magic little box of tricks that they were going to pull out, and churches really, and pastors and leaders really kind of found a distaste toward that. It kind of became this little bit of a tension, right? And so there's a cultural world, but to be honest with you, that wasn't the main reason. The main reason is because we see ourselves as more of a strategic outsider, someone who walks along and journeys with the team, with the senior leadership, helping them to kind of discover what God has given to both them as a leader, but also to the church that they're serving. And so we felt the idea of being a navigator really just communicated in a much more clear way the relationship that we want to have with the churches that he's called us to serve.
Yeah, and that, I think, it kind of gets right back to the Church Unique title, right? It is drawing out the uniqueness of that church, not just to try to say, here's a cookie cutter program that you guys are going to do just like everybody else, the church down the street. For those of our church leaders that aren't really familiar with the Church Unique process, why don't you unpack a little bit of what that is? What is the Church Unique process, and how do you work to draw, how does the navigator work to kind of draw out that uniqueness from the church?
Yeah, great question. The Church Unique process was, when you think about any process or anything that you want to provide to an organization, you want to think in terms of what's the problem that's trying to be solved, right? And so the problem that we found very early on, that ministry leaders, and at the time, like myself, serving 17 years on church staff myself, it was this thing we called the vision vacuum, right? That churches really struggled with being able to articulate, being able to have a clear understanding of who they were, and quite frankly, where they were going as a church. As a matter of fact, the number one phrase that a church that's caught up in this vision vacuum is when lay people and leaders and people who are part of the church would say something like, I just don't know where we're headed as a church. I don't know who we are. We trying to be this church, we trying to be that church. And really, God gave birth to the vision framing process that's embedded within Church Unique. And it really does just that. It walks alongside, we walk alongside with leaders, with pastors, and help them to discover that unique identity and that unique direction where God has taken the church. Can you imagine a church that has that kind of alignment, where you got 10 leaders, 20 leaders, 30 leaders, maybe even 100 leaders that can all answer the same 5 irreducible questions of leadership? Quite frankly, Ben, that's where I think synergy really begins to take off.
I'm excited that we have at least 5 in BCI in our convention that are certified to actually facilitate, to be navigators for churches, to go through the Church Unique process. And so, I'm hoping that will be something we'll be able to bring more clarity to more churches, for sure.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm so excited about the team and their skill set, their capacity. Going to knock it out. I can't wait to hear stories of that transformation that's happening within the churches and within the ministry leaders.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today and telling us about Church Unique and bringing your passion. I always appreciate to hear how passionate you are just about the Church Unique process and the clarity it can bring.
Thank you, Ben. What a privilege. Thank you guys for your partnership, and continue to be praying for you guys.
Thank you so much.
Another great ministry partner that serves the BCI churches well is the American Church Group, an insurance agency that specializes in serving church insurance needs in order to manage risk.
Well, I want to welcome Terry Townsend with us, and Terry is a familiar face to the Baptist Convention of Iowa, and as someone that we not only have a good partnership and friendship with, but who also supports us. And usually Terry comes up during our annual meeting and presents us with a big check, and that's always the fun part of that meeting, where we get the giant, it's probably a 4-foot by 2-foot check or something.
Yes.
And so, but Terry has been a longtime partner, and so we wanted just to talk briefly about some of the things that maybe you're seeing within church risk management and areas that pastors should be diligent in making sure they're on top of, and maybe how COVID is impacted. So to start, maybe tell us a little bit about Brotherhood Mutual and your relationship with churches and how you serve churches.
As Chris said, my name is Terry Townsend. The name of our agency is American Church Group of Iowa. We represent Brotherhood Mutual Insurance Company, which is a church specialty insurance company. They specialize in insuring churches and camps and denominational offices, and we insure a lot of BCI churches. We're very thankful for the relationship we have with you, Chris, and the BCI.
So as you have observed COVID this year and the impact, are there any things from a risk management perspective that you have seen that churches should be aware of as they deal with the consequences of COVID?
That's a great question, Chris. A lot of churches and customers have been very concerned about how to deal with the coronavirus this year, and frankly, I don't envy a pastor's job this year. It's been quite a challenge to navigate through that whole thing. Brotherhood Mutual has, on a weekly and sometimes even a daily basis, provided a lot of resources on their website, www.brotherhoodmutual.com. In fact, if you just go to that website, there'll be a direct link immediately to COVID-19 resources. And that kind of just leads into just some general risk management practices of making sure you have safe facilities, making sure you have proper supervision. We encourage churches. Some churches still hesitate to do background screening of their youth ministry workers, and we can help churches facilitate that, or develop your own plan of screening youth workers and ministry workers, Sunday school teachers. That's real important.
Well, Terry, thank you so much. We really appreciate your partnership, and just always look forward to visiting with you. We have an interesting conversation every time we do, and I appreciate your friendship and your ministry here in Iowa.
Well, thank you, Chris, and I really appreciate working with the churches in the BCI. And for those customers, thank you for insuring with us. If you do not insure with us but would like for us to evaluate your insurance, we're always willing and able to do that free of charge, no obligation.
Amen. And the best way to contact you?
Just call my cell phone, 515-971-9375, or you can get on our American Church Group website. Just go to www.americanchurchgroup.com, look at Iowa, and you'll have all of our contact information there.
All right. Thanks so much, Terry.
Thank you, Chris.
The Iowa Men's Conference is a great example of a statewide partnership to reach the men in our communities, and we want to invite all the BCI men to participate in one of these 3 locations.
Hey guys, Pastor Paul here. I want to take just a minute and brag on God. You know, when the Lord called our family to Iowa 7 years ago, I brought with me a passion to reach men. We began in 2015 with an annual men's conference. BCI was there at that first conference just to kind of check it out and support us and encourage us. Well, after the conference, Chris McCrae of BCI and I, we sat down and began to pray and dream and ask God to give us vision. And the vision that God gave us was to have a multi-site men's conference across Iowa that, Lord willing, will spread across the Midwest and beyond. And so a couple of years later, through our partnership with BCI, we saw a men's conference location here in Ankeny at First Family Church. And then last year, a location in Cedar Rapids. And so guys, I just want to tell you that we need to reach men. The statistics are overwhelming. If you can reach the dad, if you can reach the man in the home, you're likely to reach that family, to reach that home. And so guys, let's reach the men of Iowa. Let me encourage you to come to the annual Iowa Men's Conference. All the information is at iowamensconference.com. And get involved and just come this year and catch the vision. And God may lead you to host, to be another location and to host a men's conference in the future. Think about coming this year and maybe even hosting a men's conference location in the future. I look forward to seeing you at the 2021 Iowa Men's Conference. We'll see you there.
Our BCI pastor and church support team is our first line of defense in serving our BCI pastors. Whether it is in providing a personal touch point or connecting them with the right resources, their goal is to help pastors fulfill their gospel calling as they lead their churches.
Well, we have the opportunity now to sit down with our pastor support team, and these are the guys that are the eyes, ears, and hands of the Baptist Convention of Iowa throughout the state. And we're so thankful for the ministry that you have to our pastors and churches. And so on behalf of them, I would just like to say thank you, but I know in return, you would say thank you to them because they are the ones that are doing the hard work of ministry out there. So why don't we just, Bob, start with you and introduce yourself. You are the new member of the team, joined us early this year.
I joined this team right before COVID hit at the beginning of March. And so it's been a really interesting, hard time. I work with pastors along the Southeast region, so mostly along the Mississippi River on the border. And so that's just it. It's been a tremendous pleasure and a blessing to get to know them, get to know the rest of this team, and work with Tim and everybody else here at the convention. It's amazing.
Yep. And Chris, you have been with us for quite a while now.
I guess so.
You have, yeah.
Okay.
The beard tells us that.
That's it. I am Chris McRae. I work on the other side of the state primarily. We're working with churches on the west coast of Iowa, along the Missouri River, all the way from Orange City down to Shenandoah and east towards the I-35 corridor. And we've got some good guys, good churches, good pastors along the way, and it's been my privilege to work with them.
Amen. Ed.
I serve with the churches that are in northeast Iowa and over to that I-35 corridor on the east side, and then with a group of churches in the Metro Des Moines area and a few down to the south central part of the state as well.
So we have really had an interesting year. Is that a safe way to say this?
Yeah.
In your just interaction with pastors and with churches, how do you think COVID has impacted? Let's start with pastors. How do you think COVID has impacted a lot of the pastors that you come in contact with on a regular basis?
I think we can all safely say that everybody's worn out. But I think pastors, more than a lot of people realize, just because the day-to-day making decisions, trying to figure out what's best, how to keep congregations safe, how to keep them engaged at the same time, like all of those responsibilities on top of the preaching the word, all those other things that, visitation, all those things that fall under a pastor's purview. More stress, I think, than a lot of pastors want to talk about and say.
One of the things that I was really impressed with a lot of the pastors is they stepped up to the plate. They looked at different things that had to be done. I don't know most of our guys were not used to preaching online or, doing all those kinds of things, and they figured it out or asked the right people and got it all going. And so there was a good level of, I don't want to say excitement about learning new things, but there was an element of that was a part of it.
I saw them step up to the plate and come through it better than they thought they would. And so there was a sense of encouragement. Hey, we've made it through. But then the COVID crisis just continued on and on and on. And so a lot of our pastors are really becoming weary. Fatigue is setting in, and they're looking for a place to get a break, as well as to figure out, how do I go on from here? What's the next step? What is it going to look like in 2021? And those kinds of things. And so they're needing some relief, but not finding that opportunity to do that. And so I'd encourage our churches to be aware of how much your pastor needs your support and encouragement, and maybe find ways to give them an opportunity to get a little bit of rest and opportunity for some break so they can come back refreshed.
So, and can I just add on top of that, I think that there are some churches that we're seeing now that are going, we have opportunity. Like there are two things that I see coming out of this moving forward that have been really, I want to say positive, but number one is I think there are a lot of churches that are recognizing kind of like who the really committed folks are in their congregation, because they're the ones that have been gracious and have been supportive and have just been trying to endure in a really difficult season. But also beyond that, I think they also go, okay, so now since everything else is wiped out, how can, innovation is a word that I don't like to use a whole lot because it feels gimmicky, but how do we continue the mission? How do we continue to engage in gospel conversations with our community and reach and serve them and things along those lines?
Right, sitting between these two guys, I want to agree with both of them. And I'll start with you. It was an opportunity for them to set aside some of the busy work of church life and to really engage in authentic ministry. But again, as Ed said, there are churches, and I would wholeheartedly agree with you that our churches need to look to take care of their pastors.
One of the when COVID first hit in March, we initially said Easter, right? We'll be done with this by Easter, and then Easter started to come, and then it was May. We'll be done with this by May, and then May came, and here we are in November by the time this airs, and we're still dealing with COVID. And so, what would you say to pastors and churches who are looking forward into 2021? And it feels like you're driving in a blizzard. It's hard to navigate vision and plans and strategies when you can only see, the next few feet in front of you here. So what would you say to those pastors who are really kind of struggling with, what do we do going into 2021 to be effective? Now, Ed, I'll start with you.
Yeah. One of the first things I would say is, pastors, guard your hearts. There are some folks who aren't back yet and who don't know what to do. There is still a good deal of fear and anxiety out there. And I think there could be a tendency after a long period of time for us to think, well, those folks weren't really committed to begin with, and to become a bit cynical toward the membership. So, let the Lord refresh you with a good dose of love and understanding, and understand that some folks maybe weren't as committed as they should have been, but there are folks who have genuine concerns. And then looking at where you are in your situation and looking forward, I don't like to use the term the new normal, but sometimes we just have to deal with what we have and determine how we can be, as much as possible, a fully functioning church, a fully functioning body of Christ under the new circumstances.
I think it's one of the great challenges that I see coming is this desire to be fruitful in ministry, when right now the season is to be faithful. And it's good to want to be fruitful, right? But you can't just run over people or run over your pastor or run over your church members in an effort to be fruitful by saying, oh, well, you're not on board with the mission, so I'm going somewhere else, and I can't. You have to stop pouring into leadership or anything like that. The whole, the results are based on God and what He's doing.
One of the areas that we work in is the area of revitalization and replanting. And maybe take just a minute and explain what revitalization is and what replanting is. Those are kind of two terms that folks will hear often, but they really have a different purpose. And we've seen both kinds of work here in Iowa, even this year, where churches have gone through a revitalization and where others have gone through a replanting. And so talk a little bit about revitalization and replanting and how that applies to churches here in Iowa.
I'll start, because replanting is one of those things that's kind of near and dear to my heart, because I've just seen it. I've seen churches that have, you've got what's going on down in Albia right now with First Family down there. First Baptist Albia closed 2 years ago, roughly. Yeah. And, you look and see what's going on, what God's doing down there through Jason Laxton and his leadership and all of that. It's really amazing. But the difference between a replant and a revitalization is basically a replant is like, if you imagine you got a flower in a pot, but the flower's dead. The pot's still good. You can still reuse the pot, but you got to replace the plant. And that's really what's happening is you're taking the pot, you're taking a church, a structure that's already in place, and you're planting something new in it. You're planting a new plant. And so you could call it a church plant, except for it's not a church plant, because it's using a facility that's already in place. And so doesn't mean that the people who used to be there are no longer welcome. They typically are. But that's what a replant is versus a revitalization, where you've got a church that maybe is just muddling along and is trying to find their way, not really sure what to do. And then all of a sudden they catch a vision for something, and boom, the next thing you know, they're growing, and there's, God's really moving through there, and the Spirit's falling on them in a way that's really empowering their work.
I think that the difference in those two concepts really is a matter of seeking what is God's plan for the future of our church, especially churches that are in decline for whatever the reason. Maybe the whole neighborhood changed, maybe the economy has failed, maybe it's just been a long time without any fresh new families moving into the community, that kind of thing. For whatever the reason, there are times when churches find themselves in a period of decline, and at that point, they need to ask the question, not what can we do to survive, but what is God's plan for our future, to reach our community and to be an effective church. And sometimes the plan is that you are poised for a real revitalization, that there is an opportunity still, and there's a will and a desire to just be refreshed and revitalized spiritually, and to be revitalized in your church dynamics, your body life, and your outreach to that community. And when that's possible, then that's the thing that a church needs to do. But there are times when a church has finished its mission. The church that has been in the community has completed its mission, and it's time for that church to consider what is the best thing in our community for the cause of Christ, for the kingdom of God, and for reaching future generations. And some of our churches have determined that the best thing that they can do is to be willing to release their facilities and the things that they have already in place to a fresh new congregation that can come in with fresh new life and vision and a new approach and really reach that community. And I've seen that happen. I've walked through that with churches, and as they come to that point when they finally realize that what we're doing is not saying we've failed and we're not going to be able to continue, so we just give up and let somebody else, but they make a very intentional decision that this is the best thing. So we're going to start the process of putting our assets and our resources in the hands of someone who can reach our community. That's the best thing we can do to reach our community. So that's what we're going to do. And they move forward in that direction. And how God has blessed that when churches have been ready and willing to do that.
Right. We have two really good examples of that in the southwest part of the state. One of each of them in Shenandoah. The congregation there decided that their mission and ministry to that community was coming to a close. And so they turned their resources over, and we found a guy, Noel Gandy, who's the pastor there. He came in and replanted a church, and now Christ Point is a vibrant, growing concern there in the community, and has become well known in the community and for a lot of positive things. Some of the former church members are a part of this. Some have drifted away, but God is doing some really incredible things there in Shenandoah. And then over just east from there is Clarinda, where through a number of things, God began doing a renewal, and Ben McKim became the pastor there. He and his wife Amanda moved in with their little kids, and over the last 4 or 5 years, that church has gone from maybe 4 to 5 people on a Sunday morning to now 75 to 80 every single Sunday morning. Again, new life and vitality has grown up in a place where there was just discouragement, and but they each did it, as you said, Ed, and that was beautiful, the difference. They determined what God wanted to do in that locality, and they were able to move forward.
Well, isn't that really kind of, like part of our job, right, is to help churches, help them figure out a little bit of what is God calling you to do in your community? What is God calling you to do in this region, And so I'm encouraged by the things I see happening with pastors reaching out and even, initiating conversations saying, hey, we have this idea about, like Ben McKim, you just mentioned him, his Bible project thing that he's working on, right? Ben wants to give away
150, 200 Bibles this month.
Yeah, in a month. So I mean, that's pretty great. Like we're just trying to help churches figure out what it is that God wants them to do, and then hopefully equipping them to get there, right? I mean, I think so it's really exciting. That's why I joined the team, because it's really exciting to me. So yeah, but I think Ed brings up the absolute right question, which is, what does God want from us? Or what is it that God wants us to do here?
And I think that's a key point, because honestly, when you look at these guys, you're seeing a wealth of wisdom and knowledge and experience. I mean,
At least a lot of age.
Yeah, at least.
And a lot of facial hair.
Which, it's a sign of wisdom, but honestly, you guys all have a wealth of experience, knowledge, and wisdom, and you are the on the field. We don't have an office where we bring people to. That's not how we function as an organization. We are out ministering and serving where our pastors and churches are. Thank you again, guys, for sharing this time, and I hope that through this, you've been able to see not only our heart and desire for our Iowa churches, but also our love just for the churches that are out there and are truly serving as gospel lights within their community. And we are here to serve you, and any way that we can, you can, if you don't have our contact info, which I think most would, but you can go to our website, bciowa.org, and you'll find a contact us form there that will put you right in touch with us. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you.
I hope you've been enlightened and encouraged by this look at ministry in the Baptist Convention of Iowa and the Southern Baptist Convention. Please join us tomorrow as we focus on planting new churches every year and North American Mission Board President Kevin Ezell.